So with that, let me turn the time over now to Dr. David Foster. He is the CEO of Caveon Test Security, and he'll be talking to us today about best practices to standards for online proctoring. Dave?
Thanks, Jamie. Good morning, at least for me anyway. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I know your time is valuable. I hope that we can present some useful information for you today. I'd like to thank Jamie and other colleagues who are behind the scenes in helping to organize and run this webinar. You'll notice perhaps that this is a slightly different title than one you may have seen earlier on. The title used to contain the phrase, the good and bad of online proctoring. We're still going to cover the good and bad of online proctoring, so no need to worry about that. I wanted to make the point that we are upgrading the best practices to standards a bit to be more useful to other organizations and to be a bit more general, and I'll say a bit more about that in a later slide. So could I have the next slide, please? Just a little note on terminology. I'm not a big fan of the term remote proctoring. It's a term I've used decades ago when talking about proctoring that a home study student would use. They would go find an uncle or a neighbor to proctor their home study exams. That was called remote proctoring. I prefer the term online proctoring because it more accurately describes the kind of technology that is behind proctoring. Like financial institutions, I think they like the term online banking rather than remote banking because ATMs were considered remote banking, and we're moving to this online world, and it's nice to use, for me anyway, I like to use the term online proctoring. So you'll hear that throughout the session today. Also, I didn't put it on the slide, but I'll use the term traditional proctoring quite a bit. All I really mean by traditional proctoring is that a person is in the room with the test taker watching that test taker. It could be the test taker could be taking a paper test, a computerized test, or an online test. But if they have another human watching them, then I'm referring to that as traditional proctoring. Next slide, please. So,
Dave, this is Jamie. It sounds like there may be a few people that are having a hard time hearing you. So you may want to maybe turn up the mic or speak up a little bit.
All right, I can. Let's see. Turn up the mic. Turn up. Maybe I can. Hold on, just a second. Settings, balance, output volume. How's that? Does that sound any better? Well, does it sound better to you, Jamie?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, I found a way to do that. Okay, thank you. So what's the big deal about security for online tests? Online testing has been around for 15 years or so, since the internet became popular, but more and more important tests are being delivered online. These are educational tests or workplace tests, certification tests. And so as long as the tests have high stakes or important decisions based on them, then they're going to need security. They're going to absolutely require security. There's no question about it. The second point is that testing locations will be increasingly non-traditional. With an online world, we don't go someplace. We stay where we are. So taking tests at your office or your school where you're going to school, or your home, are places where online tests will be taken, and therefore a security solution needs to be in place. The convenience and lower cost of online test administration is so attractive that people will do it even without security on an important exam. We need to provide a method for them to secure those exams because they are going to use them. I've been thinking recently about educational testing. Moves in the United States educational sector anyway are moving, required, I believe, by the federal government, and basic requirements by the schools to move to online testing. They do not have the infrastructure to do so by bringing everyone into the school, and so that testing is going to be distributed, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of exams in a year, and they'll need a secure solution as they have today with their paper tests. So online proctored testing is obviously the future. It's the only solution in sight that could handle the kinds of needs and volumes that exist out there. So security is extremely important. So next slide, please. So security really for an online test is the only important issue. Number one, it's a critical issue. I couldn't think of another one. Once you've made the decision, a program has to move to online testing, and they've already dealt with the technology components and difficulties around that decision, then the only important issue left is how do we secure them? Well, one way you don't secure them is probably creating more security risks with poor online proctoring. It not only may create more security risks, but it gives a false sense of security. But you're really doing the job when it's not happening. And halfway security is really worse than no security at all, because holes are apparent and you believe that the system's working and it's not. So security is the topic of today's webinar. Every single slide refers to it. So let's move to the next one. Before we get carried away a little bit, online proctoring is not the panacea. It doesn't stop all security problems. It needs to be surrounded by other security measures or layers. And I have a later slide on this. But for example, test taker agreements, there need to be strong ones in place. It has nothing to do with online proctoring. A forensics effort may be used to analyze the results. Patrolling the web for stolen content. And every program having a good security plan. These are security measures that need to be taken whether or not online proctoring is used. So next slide, please.
You know, at this point, Dave, we have a little poll that we want to ask, and this is just to get a sense of who's out there in our audience today. So I'll go ahead and bring up the poll question, and that is, which more closely describes your organization in online proctoring? You can go ahead and vote. So are you using an online proctoring service today? Are you considering using one? Maybe you've just started looking at the pros and cons of online proctoring, and maybe you are a provider of proctoring services. So we'll let people vote. It looks like we're about halfway through, and then we'll look at the results. Okay, it looks like just about everybody has voted. And let me share the results. So it looks like most people are starting to look at the pros and cons of online proctoring. And some people are doing some other things down there as well. So Dave, let me go ahead and turn the presentation back to you.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. I wrote this question, and it looks like there were a number of people answering the other column, so I need to figure out exactly how to produce that question a little better to reduce that percentage. But I appreciate you answering the question. It's a wide variety of people on the call, and so I think this applies to each one that is on the call. So I'm glad we've got that group. This particular slide, you don't have to read all the small text. List the 9 Caveon standards for online proctoring. These 9 came from the 7 best practices from our April session. The reason we moved from best practices to standards is for several reasons. One is because the concept needs to be emphasized as with having greater importance. Best practices are good, but they can be ignored. Standards are more generally written. They are usually not prescriptive or tell you what method to use, but just what result to achieve. You'll see that as we go through them. Also, we produce standards because I'm aware of some organizations looking into creating standards or adopting standards that will help testing programs decide and evaluate online proctoring services. We added these 9 standards into our already existing nearly 300 security standards that we have for testing programs. So for us, it became a bit more of a formalization of what is necessary to produce good exams. So the next few slides will cover these 9 standards. So let's get started with the first one. I'll actually read the standard and then talk a little bit about it. This one, the online proctor must be able to see the workstation, head, torso, arms, and hands of the examinee. This particular view allows the proctor to detect a much greater number of potential security problems. For example, one situation I know of, a test taker had 2 monitors, one sitting just behind the main laptop, and then a second mouse off to the right a little bit. The proctor was able to see her hand leave the existing mouse and move to the second mouse and work on that mouse for a little while. Obviously, she was watching 2 monitors at the same time. That could not be seen if all you had were the camera that sits embedded in the laptop monitor or just above the monitor. A second brief little story was a test taker who was turning pages of a book with his feet. The book was on the ground and he was a foot or so back away from the workstation and looking down kind of between the table and his body to see, and then you could also hear the pages shuffle a bit as it was moved. And it was quite easy for the proctor to determine that what the test taker was doing. These kinds of creative efforts by test takers are common, and proctors, trained online proctors can detect them if they can see enough of the situation. They can then also deal directly with it. So we recommend a camera that provides this type of view. That's the first standard. Second one, please. The test taker during the exam must have no ability to use the testing computer to access other resources, such as a internet or hard drive, nor to use non-test taking functions of the operating system or browser. This particular standard requires a lockdown or some other creative solution that doesn't allow this test taker to do those things. So basically, the lockdown would take control of the person's computer and the browser and allow only those functions that are necessary to take the test. That's a strong lockdown. A weak lockdown would maybe just control part of that and still allow other things to occur. So there's a wide variety of quality in the different lockdown programs that are used for online proctoring today. So a strong lockdown program is the standard. Next one, please. This particular standard was developed because of online proctoring services that did allow a proctor to see the test content for the student or examinee that was taking the exam. The standard states the online proctor must not be able to view test content. So the system has to be set up that the proctor can view the test taker but not what the test taker is viewing himself or herself on the screen. This is a huge security risk. There would be many, if not most programs. I certainly would not use an online proctoring service where my test content was exposed to anyone except the test taker. And so it's a huge security risk that isn't mitigated, or for other kinds of security reasons. Now, you see that line at the bottom. Yes, it's a higher standard, because you might ask me, Dave, traditional proctors walking by a person taking a test either on a screen or in a piece of paper, they can see what the test taker is seeing, and that is true. It's still bad security, and this particular standard is a higher standard than is used for traditional proctoring. And I've got a couple of those in here. What I mean by that is that online proctoring is viewed very skeptically by 99% of the testing world. We need to adopt a higher standard in order to convince them we're serious and that this is what we're doing is highly professional. This is one of those higher standards. If you prevent the test taker from, the proctor from viewing that screen, and you prevent some security risks. Standard number 4, please. The online proctor must have the ability to communicate with the test taker through, for example, email, instant messaging, phone calls, chat, whatever might be the mechanism. These messages can be canned. They don't have to be a personal, interactive session, but perhaps that would be the best in many cases. Now, why do we need this? Well, if a security issue is detected by the online proctor, so let's say the person opens up a book on the workstation. It isn't, and that's not part of the acceptable protocol. Well, the proctor can immediately contact the test taker and tell them to stop, ask them why they're doing it, what the book is, tell them to put it away. The test taker may want to explain what he or she is doing, and so there's a bit of back and forth. But often there are technical issues as well. The screen freezes, and so the test taker picks up a phone to call somebody, and the proctor can then break in and help solve the technical problem. Proctors aren't necessarily, that's not their primary role, but they do serve that in some programs, some services. So it's very important that this communication can occur. Next slide, please.
Dave, this is Jamie. So we had a comment back on Standard 3 that in some instances the proctor may need to have exposure to the test content because they need to read content to a student, depending on policy. So, and what comes to mind is, like the Americans with Disabilities Act, that somebody needs to have a reader. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, you know what? I absolutely agree. I think that during a test session, certain rules can be suspended for one reason or another. It doesn't have to be a part of a disability situation, although that's certainly a good reason. I think it's great as long as the program agrees to it, that a proctor is able to provide not a proctoring function, but a reader function for the person. Also, books might be allowed, or access to some internet resources, or there could be many other resources allowed, and the software or the test administration and proctoring systems should accommodate those. This is, after all, the testing programs, test designs, and their security standards that are being applied here. So those are certainly exceptions that I would think are proper. Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Caveon standard number 5. The proctor must have control, must have the ability to control the test session. That is, and I think these are the main functions, they can pause the test, unpause the test, suspend the test, or cancel the test. Suspend means that test can start up again some other time, some other day where it left off. Cancel means the test is actually canceled. Would have to restart again. It'd be tough for an online proctor to make that latter decision about canceling, but the online proctor will have rules in front of them for every testing program, for each testing program, that would allow them to control the session. I've watched this hundreds of times. As the effectiveness of this is amazing. As a online proctor sees a student doing something, a test taker doing something that is against the rules, they will immediately pause the test. What that happens is a box, a window comes up on the screen that covers the content of the question they're working on, and it says, you are something like, you're doing something you're not allowed to do, and maybe it's an exact message, you're using your cell phone, which is against the rules. Please put the cell phone away, and I'll unpause the test and allow the test to continue. This kind of control actually requires compliance with very little fuss. The test taker simply, and I've seen exaggerated demonstrations of this, putting the phone away or closing a book, or even to the point of sometimes tossing it across the room. But they will comply with the proctor, and the proctor can then unpause the exam. What was covering the test question goes away, and the test taker continue. In literally thousands of examples, no test taker has repeated the problem. The control is such that that particular problem does not happen a second time. They realize what the proctor can do. It's a wonderful standard. Next one, please. Okay, this is Caveon standard number 6. Examinee must be clearly authenticated as the person who should be taking the exam at exam launch and during the exam. Obviously, one of the bigger issues for online testing is how do you know that's probably the most frequent question I get. How do you know it's the right person taking the test? You simply have to, and there's some great methods. I have pictures of 4 of them here. The one on the left is facial recognition. The top one with the keyboard is a keystroke pattern recognition. You have fingerprint recognition on the right and voice pattern recognition down below. These are all very compatible with an online testing program, online proctoring program, and can absolutely, especially if you combine a couple of them, you will have a situation with almost no false positives. You will not allow people to take the test. I think this is, with these techniques in place, I think this is going to be the easiest standard that will never have, it will probably not go away, but simply be routine. So these particular methods should be used. Now, I don't like the use of identification documents, whether it's for traditional proctoring or identification or for online proctoring. A government-issued ID can be faked, easy to use. Proctors generally aren't trained to evaluate them. And the problem is compounded if that ID is being viewed through a webcam. It's certainly not as easy. You know what happens when you travel and the pains they go to validate a government-issued ID. So I'm a bigger fan of these more online methods. And they're not that difficult to implement or expensive. Okay, next standard, please, number 7.
Dave, I've got a couple of questions that I wanted to back up on, if we could.
Yeah, sure.
How does Caveon feel about innovative exams? For example, if it's like off-site proctoring where there's a kiosk and there's 3 cameras on it, maybe one above the candidate, one looking at the candidate, and at the side of the kiosk.
Okay, so is that the question? What do I think about that?
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds like a secure. I'm not sure, I'd say it's more innovative. It sounds like a secure testing situation, at least as far as what the standard number 1, which is view of the test taker. And so I think it's acceptable. It's as long as it's quiet, which it would be in a kiosk, but it would probably also be quiet in a person's room or in a person's office. And so to me, it sounds like a fine that it meets at least a couple of the standards we've already mentioned.
Okay.
Do you have another question?
I do, but I think you're going to be talking about it next, so I'll let you keep going.
Okay, thank you. Caveon standard number 7. The test session must be video recorded and stored, particularly the security incident. So you don't have to record or store the entire session, just the security incidents that are recorded. Stored records need to include any information relevant to the security of the test, including proctor logs, incident timestamps, conversations, etc. So basically the point of this particular standard is it provides support for decisions you might make. If you see someone cheating and you cancel the test, you have a record of that cheating that is indisputable. In traditional proctoring situations, it's the word of the test taker against the word of the proctor. Should civil or criminal action need to be taken based on this, it provides evidence of that. If a testing program decision is challenged in the courts, it provides evidence for defense. These particular records must be accessible. In other words, you all know that you don't just store something that you can't get to. So they have to be easily accessible so that you can see when the incident occurred and do so in a fairly quick period of time. But be warned, this particular standard will require some space on servers or in the cloud or somewhere, because obviously recording a large amount of video will take some space. A very, very useful standard. Number 8, please. Caveon standard number 8. Organizations with online proctoring models must conduct and publish research on effectiveness. Now look at them. Look at the line at the bottom. Yes, it's also a higher standard. So what does it mean by research on effectiveness? And basically, you could do some research to compare the method you're using with maybe a traditional proctoring method that you're using as well. Well, count the number of incidents over a year's time. You could also, you don't need to compare it to traditional proctoring. You could simply count the number of incidents month by month and see if they're reducing. Or you could simply do preference work. In other words, do people like this? What would like change? Is this more convenient? How do they like the pricing? Those are all important research questions for online proctoring today. And it is a requirement, in my opinion, and we've made it a standard, that this research needs to be undertaken when a service is offered or used. It'll give you a lot of peace of mind in the long run. But again, it's a higher standard. It's not happening. I mean, if you ask me, where's the research on traditional proctoring? And I've done the searching, and it's not there. For some reason, 80 years ago, it seemed such a reasonable method that nobody thought it needed research. That's not what they think about online proctoring. They think it's dangerous, that there are a lot of security risks, and they need to know that it works. So this standard was added to encourage organizations to present what they're providing works. Next standard, please. I don't know if I'd call this the most important standard, but at least it's really important to understand this standard. And I mentioned it on an earlier slide. Security provided by online proctoring must be supported by other security procedures, such as, and this is a very tiny list of examples, such as secure item and test design, test taker, NDAs, data forensics, periodic audits, web monitoring, and others. I created a graphic to illustrate how online proctoring may be kind of a core security service, but it would be ineffective or exposed if it didn't have these other layers of security surrounding it. Anybody wishing to protect their test assets, which are good test scores, good meaningful test scores, and the content of the exams, needs to have a broad view of what security means. Online proctoring for online tests is a part of that solution, obviously. But if it were just viewed as, oh, I've got online proctoring, I don't need to do anything else, then that's opening up to some serious security problems. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now that concludes the 9 standards. We're continuing at Caveon to work on those. We'll probably subdivide them a little bit, make them a little bit easier to understand. But those are how they sit right now. There are other organizations looking to create standards or guidelines for online proctoring. You're probably familiar with some of these on this page. They are the organizations known to provide guidance, and some to provide standards. I've worked with the American National Standards Institute, even on helping them understand online proctoring and how to do it. But also the International Test Commission at the very bottom has added that one of the secure testing models is an online proctoring model. And so they put that in their guidelines for online exams. You could find that on their website. The others are in the process of investigating the value of this, and Caveon is going to offer its standards to them to maybe make their chore a little easier. Anyway, look to these organizations for a lot of future guidance in this area. Next slide, please. Jamie, did you have a question?
Nope, sorry, I thought it was the poll question, but it's going to be next. Sorry.
Okay. So what are the consequences if these particular standards are ignored? I think they're all about equally important. None of them should be ignored, I think, without some risk. There will be security holes, therefore, and these will be exploited. We all know about the creativity of the people that take exams. If they know of a security weakness, they will exploit it. They will share it, and pretty soon everybody will know it. And you'll end up having to adjust the system anyway. It will lead to rampant cheating and worse yet, even theft of the content. The solution will be worse than traditional proctoring, which is already a fairly low standard, but it does the job. It will also lead to a lack of test validity and to loss of program credibility. So, as long, ignoring standards, you kind of do so at your peril. And so whether it's Caveon standards or some of the others that are coming out, they should be, attention should be closely paid to them. Next one, please.
Okay, and here's our poll question. So this is really just to get your opinion after, after hearing what Dave had to say. Let me launch this poll, and it's true false. In 10 years, most online high-stakes tests will use online proctoring. So the polls are open right now, and you can go ahead and vote. Give us your opinion. And one of the things that I've been doing is collecting questions as Dave has been speaking. So we'll be getting to some of those questions soon. Looks like just about everybody has had a chance to vote. So we'll go ahead and close the poll and show the results. Looks like a majority of you think that there will be a lot of online high-stakes proctored exams. So Dave, let me go ahead and turn this back to you.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, that was an interesting result. I would not have been surprised to see the exact opposite. But it's nice to see that optimism. And I absolutely agree with you. Online high stakes tests. How else is it going to be secured? So they better be using it, or I'm not sure how they're going to be delivering those tests. I guess you can deliver tests online, high stakes, at a traditional testing center. So maybe that's what those that maybe that's what people are thinking as well. So thank you for that. Next slide, please. So these last 3 or 4 slides are kind of summary slides. This is kind of a positive slide. So if you've got good security, online proctoring, following these standards, this is what you can expect. More threats will be anticipated and watched for, and detected when a potential breach comes through, is attempted. Professional and unbiased decisions by proctors, very important. There will be fewer actual incidents, that is, fewer actual attacks, fewer actual damaging breaches. The security risks will be drastically lowered. They'll never completely go away. There are always creative ways to cheat, to steal tests. There are many ways that online proctors can't do anything about. So no guarantees, but these are pretty definite positive benefits. And then you'll, along the way, have gathered really strong evidence to support whatever action you take. Next one. So, what are the trends and possibilities in online proctoring? Well, first of all, before we talk about online proctoring, with traditional proctoring, there are no trends. It's been in place for, I'd say, 100 years. And it isn't changing. It's not going to go anywhere. It is as good as it's going to get. New technology, I suppose, can come in and help a little bit, but nobody appears, even when those are available, to be using them. So I think we've seen where traditional proctoring is. What's exciting is that with online proctoring, it's just starting. It's at its beginning of effectiveness, and it's pretty effective. So what we can expect to see are some improvements in the technologies. Better cameras, for example, higher resolution, greater field of view. We can expect some improved biometric tools. I think what we'll see, and that's that middle bullet, is more automated support. I think much of what the proctor might be doing could be converted in an artificial intelligence way and have the computer do it. For example, if the test taker gets up and walks out of the room, obviously a proctor can see that. But if the proctor is looking in a different direction, the machine can certainly see that as well by analyzing the video changes. I think there are at least 10 areas where this automated support may become valuable and improve the quality, efficiency of proctoring, and probably allow a proctor to monitor many more stations, reducing costs even further. So these are wonderful, exciting possibilities. I think we'll see a lot more high-quality online proctoring providers. I think the ones that are out there today, some of them fall short on the standards, but it's probably not too far from them to make adjustments and fixes to their products. And so I think we'll see some really good proctoring providers in the near future. And there may be other uses of online proctoring. For example, and I just put one down here, to monitor traditional proctors. it's no secret that from time to time, traditional proctors are the security risk. They help out the test taker. They actually steal the content themselves. They have reasons to do this. They have conflicts of interest. To assure a testing program that wants to use traditional proctors, an online proctor can be used. So I think there are some situations, especially in educational testing situations, where this is a good use of online proctoring. So next one, please. Evaluating the services out there is easy. You can compare with Caveon standards, just go down the list, or you can use standards that some of these other organizations are and will be producing. And then it wouldn't hurt to ask them for their effectiveness research. How do I know you're catching all the problems? Show me the data. And so it isn't that difficult to do. What's usually difficult to do is you won't want to do it. You will want to find a less expensive route, or cross your fingers and believe the security problems won't happen to you, and you can get away with it. But I would certainly, obviously, recommend using a checklist before you make any decision. Next slide, please. So this is the last actual formal slide. We have a couple more, another polling question as well. But this is an exciting technology. We live. It hasn't been that long that online testing has been possible, and it isn't. Online proctoring has been around less than that. Where it's going to go, the sky's the limit, and it's extremely exciting to be part of that effort. Those of you who polled that you were an online proctoring services provider, I applaud you for being part of this and pioneering the way. Traditional proctoring is weak. Even though there's no research on it, enough security problems occur that we know it's not effective, not very effective anyway. It needs to be replaced or supplemented in some way. Replacing it with an online proctoring model that's just as weak is not the solution. Those of you with the testing programs out there, you have the power to insist on models that follow the standards, and I'll be right there with you, asking for the same thing. So let's. I think we have one more. That kind of concludes, except for some questions and answering period we have. Concludes the final slide, but we have a poll slide, and there's a slide a little later that talks about a paper that I wrote with Harry Lehman from the College Board, comparing different online proctoring services. We released that in March. There'll be a link provided on a page. You can go to that. It's a little dated. There are a couple of new entrants, and but it does give you a more detailed view of what to look for if you want to get that specific to, much more specific. So I'd recommend going and getting that paper as well. So that's why, anyway, I'll let Jamie continue.
All right, we'll go ahead and launch our last poll. And the question here is, do you agree with the statement that online proctoring can never be as secure as traditional proctoring? I know we've got a couple of questions, and Dave, I'll kind of tee you up a little bit. Some of the questions revolve around using online proctoring in a school environment where there are a lot of students who test, and the costs associated with doing online proctoring for that population. So I'll kind of key you up for that. People are just finishing up with their responses to the poll. So we'll go ahead and close that out and show the results. So it does look like that they do feel that there could be some plausibility here in terms of security with the two types of proctoring that are available. Dave, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, you know, I expected that a large number of you looking into this would only be looking into it because you think there's some possibility that it would be a very good secure method. And I agree that I believe, as you can tell, that it will be much more secure. I don't have a lot of respect for the traditional proctoring method, but it seems to do its job, you know, above average anyway, security-wise. Maybe online proctoring will never get to that point, but you know, personally, I think it has already gotten to that point in some service providers, and could certainly get much better. So, thank you. Never's a long time. That's my comment on that. But I appreciate that result too. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to hide the results now, and we'll open it up for some questions. As I mentioned before, there were a few questions around using online proctoring in a education, like state assessment type of a model. Can you speak to that and what you see, some of the barriers in terms of cost of getting all the equipment, and how do you see us overcoming that?
Yeah, okay. A couple of I want to answer it in two different answers. One, for those of you who aren't familiar with the statewide assessment program, state assessments that they test people, the students, usually during a very brief window of time in all the schools in a state, and they do it using paper for the most part, although a couple states are completely online. If the testing is still on paper and they're testing in classrooms with 30 to 40 students, the biggest threat, the biggest risk has been teachers and administrators cheating. They are the ones that are affected by the test results more than the students are. And they need, with a number of federal laws looking for accountability, they need to make sure those students do well. So they have tremendous motivation to help cheat, and they have many ways to do it. Some of those ways occur during the exam, when they're giving the exam, what's on the walls, what they say to the students, and then even afterwards when they're gathering up the answer sheets, they can take those answer sheets and change the answers. It's a huge problem that is right now currently affecting that world. Online proctors may be able to simply monitor each of those classrooms in a fairly inexpensive way. One proctor watching a proctor, a teacher administering exams to 30 or 40 students. It seems to be a pretty good ratio and may not add much expense. So that's, I don't know if anybody's looked at that solution, but I've thought of it often. I think it may work. A second solution is if, and within 2 years, those millions and millions and millions of exams have to go online. And they do not and will not in 2 years have the infrastructure in schools. They can't ask people to bring their own equipment because they don't even have outlets to plug in laptops. And so they just do not have the infrastructure and probably will not. I believe a distributed online model where educational tests, these statewide exams, can be given using a community's internet resources, a community's locations, non-traditional school locations by churches, retail businesses, civic offices, homes. There are a lot of alternative locations that have separate internet connections, lots of power outlets to test. I'm talking about distributing, so you won't get 30 people in a room. You'll get 1 to 5. And that it certainly is an operational and organizational challenge, but less of a challenge probably than trying to do that testing with the existing bottleneck within the schools. So I think online proctoring is a solution to both of those types of security problems and test administration problems.
So Dave, related to that, you mentioned kind of a ratio of 3 to 5. Is that of students or test takers to proctors? Is that a recommended ratio? Do you have a recommendation that you would make?
From what I've seen, I've been involved with Criterion, helping them to set up their online proctoring a few years ago, and they use a maximum of 20. And any minimum is fine, but a maximum of 20 on thumbnail screens on a proctor screen at one time. That seems to work. However, and this is going to surprise you, I think, is that I think that's too small of a ratio for the type of technology we're talking about. I think with more automated support, proctors can deal with, many more than 20 at a time. Most test takers do not cheat. They don't attempt to steal content, though we need to find ways to determine who they are. Kind of like I'm on some sort of TSA traveling list that I'm considered a safe traveler apparently, so I get to go in a different line. We need that metaphor, and that kind of thinking with online proctoring is that why do we have a proctor sit and watch a person who isn't going to cheat? And we perhaps, after some experience, know that person isn't going to cheat, but still we devote a resource to watching that person. When the computer can watch in an artificial intelligence way sufficiently to alleviate our concerns and allow a proctor to supervise maybe 100 or 200 test takers at one time. I know that's a little, I know you're cringing at that, but I think it's possible, and I think we'll see that in a few years.
Dave, do you know of any programs that have been accredited in terms of online proctoring, that have had their online proctoring accredited? I'm not saying this right. Are there any accredited
I know what you're asking.
programs?
That use online proctoring?
Yes, thank you.
Right?
Yeah, accredited.
You know what? I could have done a little research. It would not surprise me that if there are programs that are accredited using online proctoring today. Some of these agencies that have standards, the standard says a competent proctoring model will be used. It doesn't say you must use a traditional proctoring model. That an organization like that, by viewing the procedures that an organization is using for online proctoring, should be easily able to say this is a competent proctoring model. And so it wouldn't surprise me, but and I didn't do that research. I know there were several organizations going through it. I believe I heard that some of them passed different accrediting bodies steps, but honestly I don't have any information on that right now.
I'll do one more question and then we'll close our session for today. How often do proctors run into privacy roadblocks when using these type of authentication methods that you've discussed?
Almost never. There are some that have potential. Fingerprint, for example, is a biometric that in Canada and in France are considered part of a person's privacy, and in general those fingerprints can be linked to criminal databases that exist in law enforcement agencies in most countries. Fingerprints probably provide me with a little bit of concern, but some of the others, such as keystroke and pattern recognition or voice recognition or facial recognition, they're not generally used in that fashion. They are simply a mechanism today in online proctoring to make sure the person that registered for the program and typed a phrase is the same person that's sitting in front of the proctor ready to launch an exam and retypes that same phrase. It's simply a short-term biometric use, and I've not heard of any privacy concerns with those kinds of biometrics used in that way.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I know that we have a number of other questions that we weren't able to get to today, and one of the things that we can do is we'll take these questions and answer them in like a Word document or an email and send that to everybody who registered for the session today. Just a couple more slides that I want to share with you. Dave mentioned that he has a paper that he and Harry Lehman wrote on online proctoring systems compared. It can be found at this URL. And again, these slides from this webinar will be sent to you, as well as a link to the recording. And you'll see that within a couple of days. Lastly, we mentioned the Handbook of Test Security. And if you're interested in ordering that, there is a discount code for that. So you can see that at the bottom of the page here, and use that to order your book from Routledge. I want to thank Dave for his time today and his thoughts and his vision around online proctoring and sharing these standards with all of us today. And I appreciate you, our attendees, for listening in on the session today. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope you'll join us for subsequent Caveon webinars. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.